Hello again. Well, you can tell when there's rainy days because I spend more time editing videos because I don't want to go out in the rain. So today, this footage is from after the speakers are all put together and ready to test. So now I need to actually get the sound system all set up and tested. And this isn't specifically a unboxing video because, it's an amplifier. There's not much to unbox. And I personally kind of hate unboxing videos, but I did have to obviously do an unboxing. And then I'm going to just work on wiring everything, which is for the most part straightforward. But as I've mentioned in the previous videos, I do prefer to color code everything, so I wanted to double check and make sure everything was ready to go and functioning. As you'll see at the end, we did have some challenges that required a little bit of sorting. This is where I discovered that one of the cables, I must have got distracted when I was wiring it and ended up switching a couple wires on the inside. It's easy to do because the little labeling on there is pretty small fine print. But it's pretty straightforward. Although, in retrospect, staring at the mess that I've created is less than entertaining, I guess. But this is by far definitely the most enjoyable part of the build. At the moment, I'm just double checking all of the dip switches for the amplifier's hardwire settings. So there's this particular model of amp comes with the option to I thought, it's a brand new amp. I haven't used one in a few years. I should look at the instructions and just see if there's anything I need to know. And that turned out to be a waste of time. It took me a whole of like 20 seconds to glance through them and realize that there was absolutely nothing useful. So, yeah, that was pointless. But anyway, it didn't even talk about the dip switches in there that I saw. So, yeah. But on the back, there's some dip switches which allow you to have a little bit of control over how the amp is actually functioning. You can set up things like if you want a filter to eliminate the lowest frequencies, which for the full range amplifier is a useful thing. For instance, it shouldn't get any of those frequencies in it just because the crossover is splitting that and sending everything from usually around 100 to 120 hertz down through the sub amp, and then 100 and whatever up gets all sent through the full range. So I was just turning that on, and then there's also the option to do stereo inputs or parallel input, mono input, bridged mono or stereo output, which I don't need the bridged mono, so making sure everything is stereo. And here I ended up having to go to the hardware store to get some screws and things, so I'm putting those in, and then I'm trying to decide I was working out in my head if I wanted to do some shorter cables to go, like, for if the sub is next to the next to a full range. And I usually have this when I have a satellite system, because then the sub is actually like, or the full range is actually attached to the sub, because I had to put a top hat in the sub and then stick a satellite stand, just a metal tube, to connect them. These subs were not built with that. I could add it down the road if I wanted to, but these subs were intended to be laid on their side instead of standing on end. And the full range speakers, I've actually designed them to be on stands specifically so that when we're at an event that we're using uplighting, we can put a scrim skirt around the stand legs and put a light behind it. That actually looks pretty good. In fact, let me add that real quick here. Alright, so there you can see what that looks like. I've got the full range sitting on top of the speaker stand. We've got this particular light is called a Gigbar Flex, and I'm still learning how to get the most out of it, but it does produce some fun light. One of the things that I think I'm going to be trying to use is to utilize the 4 strobe lights across the light. They're little purple tiny lights there in that picture. They can either be a bright white light or the UV light. And I think I'm going to do that to where I use them with my sound controller. I'm not using all of the buttons on it as I reprogram it for the program that I'm for the mix program that I'm using, which coincidentally, my nickname with my brothers when I was younger was Mix. They were, I don't remember if they were drunk or high, but they were having a party with some friends, and for some reason came up with the idea that my name was Mix that night, and it kind of stuck with them for a few years. This is probably going to bring back some flashbacks for them, because I haven't heard that in a long time. But the program, coincidentally, that I'm using to control the sound is actually called Mix, spelled with 3 X's. It's a freeware version of some of the commercial versions. Would be the equivalent would be Virtual DJ or Serato, or I believe there's another one called Tractor or something like that. I used to use Virtual DJ, and I was always frustrated with it because when I'd buy a MIDI controller, in my opinion, if I've bought a piece of hardware, it should come with the ability to utilize it properly. And I don't know, about 15 years ago or so, somewhere along the line there became a disconnect, and you ended up having to buy the controller, and then you had to buy the program to use the controller, and that always drove me nuts. So I would always just limp by and use a crippled controller, just because I don't do beat mixing. I never have, and I'm not terribly interested in doing it. I do sometimes, try and get things to line up a little bit and make the beats match a little bit and speed things up or slow things down. And I had to pause here. I had to get after Charlie a little bit. It seems that dogs don't have the ability to go backwards. They always go one direction in a circle, and they can't go the other direction. And so he was getting tangled up in the speaker cords, and I had to free him from that trouble. But anyway, back I'm now back to playing with some cables, and I'm marking these shortened cables just with a piece of orange tape so that I know which ones are the shorter and which ones the longer. And coincidentally, I inadvertently screwed up because I was thinking I need 8 cables down the line, and I didn't remember how long the cables were that I had before. I do remember that I never had a problem with the length of the cable, and I was thinking that they were like 40 or so feet. And so when I got this, it was a spool of 250 feet, and I figured I'd cut that into quarters and then into eighths, which worked out to be about 30 something feet per cable, and that turns out that's quite short. It'll work really well when I do end up having 8 speakers, if for those events where I need that extra sound. But when I've got only the 4 and I need them in the corners of a room, a small gym, that's just too far. So I kind of screwed up there. We discovered that with the wedding. We had to take a couple of cables and couple them together to get the speakers where they needed to be. But that's okay. We made it work. We'll continue to make it work. It's just something I'll have to change and fix in the future when we've got a little bit of money to spare. And the boxes finally got bad enough that I decided I needed to correct that. So I'm going to take a few minutes here. But anyway, so the program, it drives me nuts that it's literally like if I were to go buy a 4-wheel drive pickup truck and then have to pay someone every month to actually run the engine. Like, I can have the pickup truck and I can sit in it and I can steer with it. Like, if I want to just push it downhill or whatever, I can steer and I can brake and I can do all that stuff. But when I actually have the engine running, I have to pay somebody else for the engine. That's just stupid. And like, there's so many things that we have gone towards that in America and maybe the world, I don't know, but it's just absolutely stupid. So I refuse to participate in that. I actually, until now, until just recently, anytime I used the virtual DJ program, I was using a version from like 2010 because I refused to update the program. I didn't need to update it for any of the features and the requirements that they implemented. For instance, you have to have an online account. Again, that's something I think is just garbage. That's a load of crap. I shouldn't have to have an online account. If I've bought a device, I shouldn't have to register it unless I want to. So I used an old version that was before they had that requirement. And I would just use it, in the crippled form, because I wasn't about to pay them an extra $250 to have the program function. So one day I was just looking and found this freeware version, and I use a lot of freeware programs. In my opinion, they are as good, if not better, than the commercial programs, because the commercial programs get it in their head that they need to be a certain way and they stop listening to their users. Adobe is one of the worst. I've actually had 4 different programs over the years that were purchased by Adobe and then shut down. Photo Styler is the one that comes to mind the most, because in my opinion, back in its day, and this was 20 years ago, but back in its day, Photo Styler was a far superior program to Photoshop. And Adobe knew that, so they bought it. And then they crippled it and they quit producing it, and they didn't really implement any of the benefits of Photo Styler into Photoshop. So they literally just wiped out a better product so that their product could be the best. And Adobe was the first group of programs that I eliminated as soon as they went to a subscription. I refused to pay a monthly subscription just so that they can provide updates that I probably don't need. And I'm an outlier when it comes to that, and so be it. Cool Edit Pro was another program that I used to use, and Adobe bought that, and they did a decent job of implementing some of its features into I don't remember what their version of the program is, but they made it difficult enough to use that program that I have been using Audacity ever since. I use OpenOffice instead of Microsoft Office, and there's a lot of freeware programs out there that are a lot better, and sometimes you do have to deal with a few bugs until somebody can fix those, but so be it. I've never really had any major problems with any of those programs, and the advantage is that if you wanted to, you could actually get into programming and make changes yourself. If I took some programming when I was in high school, and I aced the class. It was actually not difficult. I'm not trying to brag, but it was just an intro, and this was so long ago that it was Pascal was the class. I don't even think that's a language that's used anymore. But I never did my homework. I would, and I'm this way with math and English too. I turn in my rough draft and call it good. And to be fair, I think put more effort into the rough draft than most of the other students that I was in classes with, but I never did a revision. I would always just turn my rough draft in as a final copy, and rarely ever had any problems. In fact, in that particular class, I never, aside from a few minor things like I needed to change a comma to a period or a colon to a semicolon, or a few weird quirks like that, I never had to redo any of the programs that I did. And I used to love programming way back in the day when it was GW, well, even before it was GW Basic, it was just Basic. I had some friends, and we used to program and share our programs, and see who could make the best game or whatever. And that was a long time ago. But yeah, so I don't know. I haven't gotten back into programming because I learned really quickly that when you're programming for yourself, it's fun. When you're programming for someone else, it is so mind-bogglingly boring and tedious and horrible that I can't do it. I can't focus on it for that long unless I'm actually doing it for myself. And so I got out of programming, and they came out with C and C++ and Java and CSS and all these different programming languages, and I just have never gotten into programming them, which I'm kind of regretting at this point, because the Mix program allows you to create your own skins if you want to, but you do have to understand XML and CSS to be able to do it. So I'm kind of trying to play with that right now. I would like the program to function a little bit differently than what it comes as a default, and I would also like to have the skin kind of match the layout of the controller, because like I said, I'm reprogramming the controller, or remapping it technically, so that the buttons do different things, because I want the controller to actually control 4 decks instead of 2. So I can have, like, I can be playing one song and load up 3 more and have a little bit of buffer. The way that I tend to do that when I'm DJing is I tend to play 2 or 3 fast songs and then 2 or 3 slow songs, just kind of depending on the mood of the crowd. And so if everybody's enjoying the fast songs more, then I'll tend to play, an extra fast song here and there. If the dance is kind of winding down and people are dancing more slow songs, then same thing. I'll kind of gear it towards that, so that the crowd kind of dictates that. And so what I like to do is on 2 of the decks, I like to have a couple of slow songs ready to go, and on the 2 of the decks, I like to have a couple of fast songs ready to go, so that I can not have to think on the fly quite so much. And it allows me a little bit more time to actually react and talk to people and relax. So I'm kind of playing with trying to edit the skin of the program so that it'll look a little bit different, but we'll see how that actually works. So what I'm doing here is building some TS cables, some 1/4-inch mono cables that will go from the crossover down to the amps, and from the mixer eventually down to the crossover on this yellow, and then I'm color coding them so that I can just easily, quickly plug things in and not have to worry about which cable goes where. And then if I have people helping, then that's a huge benefit, because it makes it simple enough that somebody else can come in and look at it and go, oh, here's how this needs to be plugged. And in that scenario, I can glance at it and just go, oh, yep, you got it plugged in right, or oh, hey, look, this red and white, they don't go together, or this yellow and green, they don't go together, whatever the case may be. So now we're going to clean up a little bit, and then I'm going to bring over the sub amp. And these are not sponsored in any way. We went back and forth between whether we should buy used amps or not. And especially when you get into these, we used to call them boat anchor amps, because they're each one of these weighs about 40-45 pounds. They're beastly heavy amps, but as I was talking about in a previous video, I'm very much into, I want it to sound as good as possible, not be necessarily easier to carry just to save a few pounds at the sacrifice of some sound quality. And my hearing is good enough that I can actually hear some dog whistles and things. I can hear well above the average human hearing, and I can hear all the way down to about 22 hertz, actually hear down to 22 hertz, which is I mean, human capability is supposed to be 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and I can hear somewhere around 22 to 23 kilohertz, I believe. It's hard to measure. I don't have the tools to properly measure the high end, but like I said, there's I haven't found a dog whistle yet that I can't at least hear a little bit, and I've always been proud of that, and I like the fact that I can hear well. So I don't like things like MP3s where they compress and change that sound. I can hear the difference between a CD and an MP3 on a lot of systems, and especially on a good system like this. It's easy to hear that difference. So this is what we have to go through when you discover that you're struggling with a cable that you don't realize is broken. or built wrong. So things worked, then we changed and they didn't work, and so now we're trying to figure out what's going on, and I'm at this point I'm checking the dip switches to make sure that I didn't accidentally set something to bridged mono when it should have been stereo, or vice versa, whatever. And now we're just going through one by one and methodically going to make changes, plugging each cable in until we eventually figure out that all of the speakers themselves are wired correctly, and the component side, the amplifiers and the crossover, are all hooked up and wired correctly, and it's just a matter of finding that particular cable that turns out was wrong. And this was a very frustrating process. It went much quicker because Emily was actually out here working with me, and so she was making some changes. That's why I was just turning knobs, basically turning the amp on and off. But back to the amps. In the past, as I've mentioned, previous systems, I'd always have the luxury of having an existing system, and so I would be able to take a little bit of a chance or a risk. And so I got some killer deals on some of the amps that I've used in the past. I got one on eBay, for instance, and it was a like $600 amp at the time to buy new, and I got it for like $150 after shipping, because it had a scratch. So as you turned the, I guess it's an attenuator, the volume knob on the amp, it would create a crackle sound through the speaker. So if I ever had to, before I fixed it, if I ever needed to adjust anything, I would turn the amp off, adjust it to where I needed it, turn it back on. Problems solved. No worries. The amp worked fine. I ended up being able to open the amp one day, and I spent a couple hours just checking things inside of it, and I had a pretty good idea of what it was, and I ended up just unsoldering, desoldering. Yeah, probably desoldering. Anyway, I removed the solder and pulled the volume knobs off for it, and I had ordered some brand new ones. And there's a couple of other parts that I ordered at the same time, since I figured I was going to be working on it. And then I just kind of vacuumed it out, cleaned some of the dust up, stuff like that, just general service, I guess. And I never had a problem with that amp ever again. In fact, that was one of the amps that I sold to my best friend, along with a good chunk of the sound system when we moved up here. And he still has it and pulled it out the other day. He's powering a couple of dual 12 subs that we built together, so it's a good deal for him. And it was a great amp for a lot of years. Like I said, I never once had a problem with it. We were getting ready to do that, and I'm super glad we didn't. We ended up deciding that it was worth the cost to buy brand new amps, just so we didn't have the stress of trying to figure out in a rush if something was broken, or worst case scenario, if we got it and it did need repairing, I'd have to wait for parts or wait for another amp, something along those lines. So we ended up getting just a pair of new amps. I did get a deal on the smaller of the two amps, because it was a floor model basically, but I got. I'll take a deal when I can get it. But yeah, I'm super glad that with the way the time went, and with the way the time crunch all went, it was just a much better option to not have to deal with that and not have to worry about it. And so these amps will just live in these boxes, probably in forever. I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see how long they last. But anyway, we just plugged that repaired cable in and now tested it and had some music going, and Emily decided that she wanted to dance. And then I have to do an official sub test. So we'll pull that down, crank the bass. And that is my official sub test. Give yourself a back massage when you lay down on the sub. That is straight up the only reason that these subs were built with the long side down. Because I enjoy my subs. We actually made sure our friend that bought the speakers from me, bought the amp, helped build the speakers in the past. He helped DJ the wedding, and when we got everything set up and ready to go, I warned everybody in the room. Like, until this point, I had done some sound testing and I'd done some, a little bit of volume checking, but I never really turned anything up all the way. And so I warned everybody, and I said, hey, I'm going to do a sound check for a few minutes. It is going to get loud in here. And I started and just turning things up, and I never did turn. This system is far louder than than I expected. The amps were both at the highest I ever had them. They were at about half. The mixer, the master channel, was about half. The computer input for the song files was about a third, maybe between third and half. And that was the most I ever had to turn it up, and that was as loud as I was willing to make it in that room. So that was it was a good event. But that's where the footage for this will end. We're nearing the end of the DJ system footage. There's actually only a couple more days, and those I haven't filmed yet. So the next couple videos will actually be building the log thrones that we used at the wedding, and then I'll be out of footage since we weren't able to get any for the wedding itself. So that'll be it for today, though. As always, thank you for watching. God bless you and yours, and hopefully you're able to stay safe and dry and healthy out there.